Another week of NFL DFS in the books, and it was a dandy, finishing off with a really fun game on Sunday night, changing a lot of money and making for a fun Sunday night for sure, and just a fun Sunday overall. It's nice to have the Sunday Night Hammer back once again, and just a delightful slate overall. So let's dive on in and break down all the big takeaways for NFL DFS. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor of numberFire. Brandon, normally I ask you how you're doing, but I know how you're doing because you bet Patrick Cantlay to win whatever the Zozo, I think it was. Not like we had a podcast about it or anything. You bet Patrick Cantlay to win the Zozo. You won a good chunk of money in NFL DFS, and it's your birthday today. It was Chris Conley's birthday yesterday, which is probably a bigger cause for celebration. So I don't even have to ask you how you're doing. I know you're good.
Chris Conley caught a touchdown, a contested touchdown, mind you.
Why weren't you telling us about the birthday narrative?
For Chris Conley?
Yeah.
I mean, I already stand for Chris Conley as it is. Like, I don't know what else.
I know, but you need to give me an indication that it's serious sometimes.
Well,
I know it wasn't serious. Birthday narratives are always serious, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm about 3 for 20 over the past 20 Chris Conley weeks. So I try not to.
What were the 3?
I guess
there was that one like week 15 or whatever when he was when Chark was out. I don't know. It was a Julio game. I think they were playing the Falcons, right? No, Julio was facing San Francisco. This is when the live final was happening, and the people I was standing by all had Conley.
Yeah,
but they all had Julio too. So
yeah, I mean, I just try to keep the Chris Conley takes to a minimum at this point because I'm sure everyone loves to hear every time we even mention the Jaguars. I'm like, Chris Conley's in play. But
I do the same thing with Jared Goff and Baker Mayfield and every other bad to middling quarterback. Yeah. So
I don't know. I just feel like sometimes I need to back off the Chris Conley bit.
But what are you doing with the cash and to celebrate your birthday?
Well, I got a nice after last night's Sunday night game, got a nice 4 hours of sleep.
Happy birthday!
Feeling great. Up early to recap all the games with you. So that's kind of what I'm doing for my birthday.
Well, the good thing is we get to start things off on such an exciting note by talking about the Eagles against the Giants, which was Thursday night. We saw Daniel Jones with his tumble. We saw Carson Wentz go full Josh Allen a couple of times. But most importantly, Brandon, Boston Scott scored a touchdown. And if not for that, I would have had a much worse Thursday night. So how did things play out in that one?
Yeah, I mean, this game ended up being exciting, but throughout, for most of the game, it wasn't very exciting.
No, it was. It was just have you ever watched The Room? I know that our producer, Cal, has. Cal appreciates these kind of movies. It was The Room of football games because it was so bad. There was so much hilariously terrible football that I kept cackling. My wife was trying to Zoom with her parents on the couch next to me, and I kept laughing. She thought that I was laughing at dumb tweets, which is usually the case. But I was laughing at the actual football happening. It was amazing.
Yeah, and I can see why, honestly. I mean, with the Daniel Jones thing. But what's not funny is that Desean Jackson's hurt again. I got to lead it off there.
Bring it down.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I love Desean. As a player, with him on the field, this team has some extra juice. Without him, they don't have a whole lot, and they played this one without Miles Sanders, Dallas Goedert, and Zach Ertz. So not a whole lot of skill position players aside from Travis Fulgham. Despite that, Carson Wentz somehow put up 359 yards, 2 touchdowns, also had 7 carries and a touchdown. Very soft matchup, I know, but at least it's nice to see some sort of pulse from Carson Wentz. His targets were funneled to Travis Fulgham, who had 11, Richard Rodgers, who had 8, Desean Jackson and Boston Scott each had 5. Of course, Sean's out 6 to 8 weeks with that ankle injury. This team is really banged up, so it is hard to figure out their most relevant sample. But what we do know is that Travis Fulgham is good. I liked him coming out of college because he was very productive, was just a little bit older than most prospects, which is usually a pretty sizable red flag. But he's averaged 11.3 targets per game over the past 3. That's a 29% target share. He's at 3 downfield targets per game. Downfield targets for us are at least 16 yards downfield in the air. Excluding Zach Ertz, nobody else in that span has better than a 12% target share. Honestly, with how bad Wentz has been overall, I think it's really just Travis Fulgham from the volume perspective. You need more efficiency to chase any lower volume guys. Boston Scott in the backfield had 12 of 16 running back carries and 5 of 7 targets. He played 69% of the snaps. Corey Clement had 22%. Scott had 3 of the 4 red zone carries, but wasn't actually in on a goal line play toward the end of the game. But then, there was a penalty, and he caught an 18-yard touchdown to salvage a lot for a lot of people. I'm sure.
I was ready to go to bed, and I was like, "Oh gosh!" I see there's a normal sized human being at running back right now, and I was sad. And then they got the penalty, and I was like, "Oh no!"
Yeah,
there's a short guy out there. Yep. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, it was a nice route, nice catch, and that's what Boston Scott can do. He's definitely involved in the passing game, which is very viable, which we'll talk about throughout the podcast for some backs who, have a floor because they can catch the ball. They face the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football next week, so the drop from what we had on Sunday night in Week 7 to Week 8 is going to be pretty substantial. For the Giants, Devonta Freeman left in the third quarter, so the backfield just favored your boy Wayne Gallman. He played 53% of the snaps. Dion Lewis and Devonta Freeman were in the mid-low 20s. Gallman had 10 of 16 running back carries, just 34 yards, but 5 of 6 running back targets, did score. And this is, despite just getting 1 target and no carries in the first half. So without Freeman, the arrow's up on Gallman. The offense is what it is. Maybe you have a take on Wayne Gallman once I'm done, but with how bad Daniel Jones has been, it's really hard to get excited about anyone in this offense. He has not yet had a league average game in per drop back efficiency yet this season, but this was the Giants' first real game with Golden Tate and Sterling Shepard both playing relevant snaps. Tate was at 47% of the snaps here. Evan Ingram led the team with 9 targets. Shepard had 8. Gallman had 5. But in 2 games with Shepard seeing at least 70% of the snaps, Evan Ingram leads the team with 23% of the targets. Shepard's at 20%. Darius Slayton's at 18%. Honestly, those aren't terrible target shares for what you see around the NFL at this point, but it's too many mouths to feed, I think, for such an inefficient offense and inefficient passer. They're at the Buccaneers, or they face the Buccaneers. I don't actually know if they're home or on the road, but on Monday night. So they're not on the main slate, and that's going to be a tough one to watch. So the primetime games next week are not great.
I'm going to avoid the primetime slate next week. That is not going to be all that fun. I think with Gallman, I wasn't that jacked to use Devonta Freeman in this offense. And if Freeman's out, I can't be that excited for Gallman. I feel better about Gallman than I did about Freeman because I feel better at the passing game work, but still. Regardless, Travis Fulgham though is really fun. We can't play name that salary because he's not on the main slate, but hypothetically, if he were in a neutral matchup, he's got to be $65,000 to $7,000 type receiver, right? At this point,
I was going to say 65. I don't know if I'm quite there to put it much above that, but I mean, honestly, if he were, I'd still consider it because the volume has just been pretty wild, and he's doing some stuff despite the quarterback play.
Yeah, and despite the offensive line play, it's really impressive. Lane Johnson got hurt again, which stinks because then you can't even expect the offense to get better. He's been hurt all year, so it's not a real change. I love Miles Sanders, and I'd love for him to be good when he gets back, but it's so hard to be jacked about this offense in general. The Week 7 FanDuel Podcast Network Listener League went to Cheese IFL with a score of 202.4. They had the full Sunday Night Hammer with, get this, Kyler Murray, Tyler Lockett, Christian Kirk, and DeAndre Hopkins in their lineups. They got there thanks to valiant running back out of Jamal Williams and a punt tight end in Tyler Kroft. So congrats to Cheese IFL on the win. The Week 8 Listener League should be posted shortly. As always, be a $5 entry with 3 entries max and no rake. I will put a link in this post up on numberFire.com. You can always find it by going to FanDuel.com/league/listener league. That's FanDuel.com/league/listener league. Eligibility restrictions apply. Let's move to Detroit at Atlanta. And before this game, there was a report that DeAndre Swift would play a larger role this week. And technically, I guess he kind of did. But, kind of more of the same. He had 9 carries and 5 targets, a 44% snap rate, which did tie a season high, but, not a huge increase from last week. The targets are awesome, and I love that. And he also had another short rushing touchdown. The building blocks are there for DeAndre Swift to be a good fantasy running back. So I think as a result that we can get some speculative shares. But you cannot go heavier than that. You cannot sniff him in cash games. He is not a fringe core play for tournaments. He is a speculative person to use on the hope that his role expands. You can't use him more than that right now. Kenny Golladay, though, you can use more than that. Over 100 yards on just 7 targets. He is #good. The offense isn't throwing much. They have not thrown more than 36 times since week 1. So Golladay hasn't had more than 8 targets yet in a game and is averaging 7 per game. That's bad volume, but he had 4 deep targets and is crazy efficient. They don't want to throw, and it's hurting most of the team. Golladay still works, but it does make him a little bit scary. The upside is still there because he's insanely good at football, and that does matter. That's also why I'm not going to chase Marvin Jones's 80 receiving yards, which were easily his highest with Golladay. TJ Hawkinson had 6 targets for 59 yards and a touchdown. He has no yardage upside, but gets tons of looks in the red zone. Like maybe you'd have yardage upside if they were to throw a bunch, but they're not there yet. He's kind of like Jimmy Graham, except if you bump him up like 20 yards, like instead of getting 35 yards and a touchdown, it's 50 yards and a touchdown. He's pretty much game stacks only for me, especially with his salary being where it's been. Todd Gurley. So if I told you, Brandon, that Todd Gurley had 23 carries and scored twice, you'd be pretty excited, right? Nah? Jazzed? He still scored just 21.2 FanDuel points. It's a very Todd Gurley game. And that kind of feels like it's his ceiling. He has gone over 20 points twice. He's been getting a lot of work recently, but I don't think 30 FanDuel points is within his range of outcomes, and even 25 might be kind of pushing it. So
I think this was the best you're going to get from Todd Gurley.
I agree. I think that's about as good as it. Like if he were at home against the Panthers, he might have already had that game, but I'd still say a ceiling of 23 points. That's kind of the way it is. So I'm not going to bump Gurley up at all.
Yeah, and per dollar, that's fine. It's just you need your guys to have a chance of.
You need to get points at some point. You need raw points, not just value. The Lions did a good job of slowing the Falcons' deep passing game. That's one thing that they can do well defensively at times. Matt Ryan was still efficient, and Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones were fine. It just kept them from going usual for them. In now 4 full games with Julio, Ridley and Julio both have 22% of the overall targets. Russell Gage is at 20%. Julio. Ridley and Julio both have 35% of the deep targets. Gage is at 19%. Ridley has a pretty decent edge in red zone targets. So I would say that Ridley and Julio are very similar, but I'll still give Ridley the slight edge because I feel better about the red zone usage, which he has in better odds of kind of stumbling into a touchdown, which he had That's exactly how things played out on Sunday. So slight edge to Ridley. I'm not changing. That's the way it was previously. Gage doesn't do enough for me, even in game stacks, despite the usage. Brandon, I do want to talk to you about Swift, though. Am I off base in saying that he is just speculative shares, not even a fringe core play yet at all?
He feels like one of those we get these every year, just players that we want to see play more, but they don't. We know kind of why, and it's it's different because it's the Lions too, because we've seen this before and we kind of know that they don't necessarily react to guys putting up big numbers. Yeah. So honestly, it's just more of you're hoping for an outcome, and that's more of a season-long mentality whenever you have 4 running backs to pick from in a week. That's not how DFS works. I don't really think there's a ceiling whenever there's a kind of a cap snap share for someone like DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, and they get Indy next week. I would assume Darius Leonard's back for that, so it's not a good matchup either. So might be a tough sell once again. Let's move to Pittsburgh at Tennessee. This game got off to a really fun start with the Steelers on top big. So I had a lot of Steelers defense, actually, which wasn't smart, but I did. And the Titans brought things back, couldn't quite close the gap. What'd you see here?
Yeah, I claimed this game on the recap sign up just because I wanted to see what the pass catchers looked like for the Steelers and really dig in because we had Deontay Johnson back, for the first real time and healthy since Chase Claypool's breakout. And I think we got a few answers here. Deontay Johnson got injured yet again. Hopefully it's nothing serious, but there is no update. So I'm going to kind of proceed as if Deontay is healthy. But there were 49 pass attempts here. Deontay Johnson had 15 targets. Juju Smith-Schuster had 14. Eric Ebron had 8. James Conner had 5. Chase Claypool had 1. James Washington also had 1. The downfield work was concentrated on Johnson, Juju, and Ebron as well. And then if you look at the pass rates, according to Pro Football Focus, Juju led with 50. Deontay Johnson and Eric Ebron both had 48. Chase Claypool ran 38 routes, which is not that far off necessarily from Deontay, Juju, Ebron, but the targets definitely didn't go there. Do I think that Chase Claypool was done for? No, but this puts me way higher on Deontay than I was. And even Juju, I don't know how to handle that because he's been so inefficient. I'm probably not ever going to prioritize Juju Smith-Schuster in DFS at this point. But again, if Deontay Johnson's healthy, I am changing my tune here on him. I'm just going to be higher on him than I was. Basically just late to that party. I don't think that that's someone saying I was high on Deontay and I'm even higher, so just keep that in mind. James Conner had a stranglehold on the backfield again, but he just kind of has a lack of a ceiling. He had 20 carries, 5 targets, 82 rushing yards, 29 receiving yards, no touchdowns, despite 7 red zone carries. He has had at least 100 total yards in 4 of his past 5 games, but he's like a high floor play. There just really isn't a ceiling. He needs to score multiple times. If he does and gets the 100 yards, obviously that puts him, in that. So he's a tier above someone like Todd Gurley, but honestly, the ceiling game just doesn't really ever feel like it's going to come for James Conner.
I think that's a good way to comp him, though. Like a higher yardage Todd Gurley.
Yeah.
He and Dave, I think that Gurley, David Johnson, and James Conner have like a cap of like 25 or so adjusted opportunities, and like that bothers me a lot.
Yeah. I mean, Conner got 30 here, but and adjusted opportunities for us are carry plus 2x targets because a target for a running back is worth twice as much on average as a carry on FanDuel. They're at Baltimore next week. The total is 49, which is kind of low at this point. It's not bad, but I don't really know how heavy I'll be on this game next week. There are a lot of others that look pretty appealing to start things off. Derrick Henry did not have an eruption day despite 20 carries. He had 75 yards and a rushing touchdown. He had 2 targets for -3 receiving yards. These games are really just within his range of outcomes. This is not some sort of victory lap for me because I was not in on him last week and he went off. This is Derrick Henry. This is what we can get because he does not get a whole lot of receiving work. He has just one game with more than 15 receiving yards. That came last week, pretty much whenever he just caught a pass when it was uncovered and ran for about 40 yards. Corey Davis had a team best 10 targets, but just 35 yards on them. A.J. Brown had 8 targets, but 153 yards. Each of those guys scored, and nobody else had more than 4 targets. Jonnu Smith had those 4 for just 9 yards. But in 2 games with Corey Davis and A.J. Brown healthy now, Davis has a 25% target share, which works out to 9 per game. 1 downfield target in that span, 2 red zone targets. Brown's at 22%, which is 8 per game. 2 total deep targets, 1 red zone target. Jonnu Smith's at 15%. I mean, it's still A.J. Brown here or nothing, really. I don't mind Jonnu, but tight end is just volatile enough where I'm never going to make anyone a full priority play outside of someone like Travis Kelce. Ryan Tannehill was still pretty good in this game overall in a somewhat tough matchup. He's been one of the most efficient passers in the NFL this season, despite a downfield attempt rate of around 10%. League average is 17%. That's the biggest drawback for me in this offense right now. Honestly, I'm to the point where if I had to pick one tight end to play, it would still be A.J. Brown over Derrick Henry. They're at the Bengals, though, next week. The total is 54.5. The spread's 4.5 points. I accidentally, when I opened up the slate, saw Derrick Henry's salary. Oh. But what would you – give me a salary for Derrick Henry in that matchup?
Well, in that matchup, I think he's like an $8,500 back. I'm guessing he'll be above that. But like, I think that like 8,500 is an appropriate salary for his ceiling.
Yeah, I think so too. And with the floor baked in, but he's 9,500, so he's gonna plague me because he can go for 202.
So like, I think I'm gonna keep him the same way I have before, where like I think about the odds that he could kill me for not using him, and I think in that matchup it's pushing 30%, and I just get that exposure. Like I think that's just what I do.
Yeah, I think that's probably how I need to handle him instead of fading him out. Right? I know it's going to be a good matchup, it should be a good game flow, but
like I know people are averse to being in line with consensus on people, but like I don't care about being consensus on one person. Like if I go 30% Derrick Henry, I'll be in line at the field, but I'm not going to be in line at the field on other people, so it doesn't matter. Yeah. So I don't care about being in line at the field. I'm fine personally. Yeah. I think 30%'s,
But we're both in agreement though that he should be closer to 85 than 95.
Yeah, it just doesn't matter with him because his ceiling's so high. So like we have to pay it. We aren't going to feel good about it. I want to go back to the Steelers receivers because I don't know if I'm bumping up Juju, and I don't know if this is me just like getting take lock or something like that. But like he had 14 targets. Deontay had 15, and neither of them got more than 85 receiving yards. Like they're still inefficient. And Deontay, at least, like, I feel better about him continuing to get targets than I do Juju. So, like, I'm okay putting Deontay up a tiny bit, but I don't know if I'm there with Juju yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. I'm really not either. It's a little bit more promising, I would say, for Juju. I guess the real question is, rank or even tier the
Deontay, Claypool, Juju.
How far is Deontay ahead of Claypool at this point?
Because
I had Claypool higher entering the week.
I did too. I think that you're right in switching those. I would say Deontay and Claypool are both in the usable tier. Juju is like he's $6,500 still. I don't think he's usable at that salary.
No, Deontay's 62, Claypool 6,000. I prefer both of those at salary than Juju.
100% agree. Let's move to Cleveland and Cincinnati. Pretty fun game, but also unfortunate because Baker Mayfield surged late here and got a win, but it looks like Odell Beckham's going to miss a lot of time. We haven't heard results of the MRI yet. Serious knee injury, though, according to Ian Rappaport. Adam Schefter seemed a bit less catastrophic about it, but we'll see. Baker did show he could play without Odell, though. He had one incompletion in his final 23 attempts. But even without Odell, and despite this performance, it would lower my expectations of this offense if Odell Beckham misses time. I know he hasn't played well, but he is still a good player, and losing good players is bad. With Odell and Austin Hooper out, we saw some new faces emerge. Harrison Bryant had 5 targets. Rashard Higgins, that's not a new face, but it's a fun face. He had 6. Donovan Peoples-Jones had 3, and that's fun because they all performed well. But again, even with Odell out, nobody had more than 6 targets. I would expect things to be pretty spread out here. Bryant is interesting because he's a tight end, and it sounds like Cooper may not play again next week. Appendectomies are no joke, man. So I would hope he sits out. And Baker has performed well with Higgins in the past. Like, I think Baker petitioned them to re-sign Higgins at one point. I could be making that up. But they're the guys I'd bump up most if you want to go at the passing game. But this could be a pretty spread out, low-volume passing offense, and that's not good for anybody. So good to bump them up, but still some trepidation for me, at least, on them regardless. Kareem Hunt had big usage again, though. 18 carries and 4 targets, which is 26 adjusted opportunities. He has 28 and 26 in their 2 non-blowouts, and it's possible they could guard Wyatt Teller back next week, which would help a lot, too. So I'm still pretty high on Kareem Hunt, even though he hasn't done a ton in 3 games with Chubb out. I still think that he is someone I am very, very high on personally. With Joe Mixon now, Gio Bernard got decent usage, but he was the clear lead back. He had 13 carries and 5 targets. He lost only 1 running back carry and 1 target. If Mixon were to miss more time, which it sounds like is possible, we can feel comfortable that Bernard will be the lead guy. That may not lead to a ton of rush attempts, but his passing game work is good enough to make up for that. So I think I feel good about Gio based on this game. AJ Green is getting usage again, and it's putting a dent in our boy T. Higgins. Technically your boy. Yeah, you should deserve credit for him. But Higgins still paid off. He's awesome. He still paid off. But the forward-looking outcome, or the forward-looking stuff may not be as good. The past 2 games with Green getting back to double-digit targets again, Higgins has just 2 total deep targets and 13 overall targets, whereas A.J. Green had 13 on Sunday alone. It does not make me want to use A.J. Green because he's hideously inefficient, but it does lower my enthusiasm for Higgins, even after he helped us, I assume a lot of us, out this week. Instead, I'm going to put Tyler Boyd back at the top here. He had 13 targets on Sunday, and 7 of those were in the red zone. That is not a misspeak. 7 red zone targets in one game for Tyler Boyd. He gets enough downfield work where he has a path to a ceiling, so I'm going to shuffle the rankings here a bit, put Boyd back on top, Higgins second, Green third. Brandon, I want to talk to you about this Browns offense, though. I'm worried about things being spread out, and I'm worried about them continuing to run the ball. So in theory, we should be on the passing offense against Las Vegas, but I'm having trouble getting there. Do you have a different takeaway on this team?
Sorry, I was looking into AJ Green. Were you talking about the Browns?
Yes.
Yeah, they're too.
Don't look at AJ Green. It's too early for that.
It's been better. A lot of his.
I know, but like it's on third. It's like Juju. It's on. He had 80-something yards on 13 targets. Like,
I know. A lot of his targets early were uncatchable.
He's no DJ Chark. I'll say that from an efficiency perspective. DJ Chark is now the Frank Gore of wide receivers. Not because of him, because of some other factors in his offense. DJ Chark is great. Other factors in his offense are not as great.
Yeah, but yeah, AJ Green's been he's been more efficient than Tyler Boyd the past 3 weeks in terms of expected points per target. But for the Browns, they're one of those teams where they're always kind of game stack only at this point anyway. I mean, Kareem Hunt is in a different position, but as far as their passing game goes, I never make Odell. I never make Jarvis. Austin Hooper really core plays, even when Hooper was healthy. I was trending on making Austin Hooper a core play for me this week, but I think it's still too spread out overall. You said they play the Raiders next week.
Yeah.
Will anybody get a 20% target share in that game? I guess Darren Waller, but.
Well, 20%. Oh, I thought you meant like just in the Browns. Yeah, you're right. Darren Waller will, but that's probably it.
Yeah, I think Bryant is the most intriguing. I really liked him coming out. I did a abnormally high amount of tight end research this year, but so I like him.
And then none of them got drafted.
all the pass blocking tight ends got drafted in the first 2 days. So
did you like Hunter Bryant more or Harrison Bryant?
I think I actually liked Hunter Bryant more. He was like the Jordan Reed comp.
Yeah, he was also like I had to watch that offense for some quarterback stuff, and he always was like, "Oh wow, he's really good." Their quarterback might not be, but he's fun. Yeah, I think Harrison Bryant would be the one I'd turn to if I were to go to receive. Like, again, I think that Baker and Higgins have pretty good chemistry, and Higgins did get 3 downfield targets. So, like, I could consider him in game stacks, but I'm not actively seeking him out. And I think there's a pretty bad floor there. I think it's just Kareem Hunt. Like, just use Kareem Hunt. I think that's the easy answer. Yeah,
and I think Harrison Bryant will probably get talked up after showing up Halls at tight end.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all you have to do. And Njoku did get 2 downfield targets and a touchdown, but I think Bryant's the preferred guy here. Let's move now to Carolina at New Orleans, the Teddy Bridgewater revenge game. And Brandon, they didn't get the win. Teddy did some fun stuff. Took a bad sack. Russell Okung got hurt, which is always sad for me. What'd you see here?
Yeah, Russell Okung for the Panthers and Teron Armstead for the Saints got injured. So
two really good left tackles.
Sorry. If I know your name as an offensive lineman, I know you're probably good. I mean, obviously, those two are a little bit different, but these could be pretty significant injuries here. So we'll have to keep an eye on that and probably just listen to the gym on Thursday whenever these teams, assuming they're on the main slate, just statistically. But I think Carolina might not be, but I'll get there. This was a kind of a weird game because the Panthers ran 43 plays, according to NFL.com's notes. The Saints were 67 without Michael Thomas and Manny Sanders. The first game without Emmanuel Sanders this year. For the Saints, the targets were really concentrated on Marquez Callaway, who had 10. Alvin Kamara had 8. Deontay Harris had 5. Traquan Smith and Jared Cook each had 4. There were only 3 downfield targets. Callaway had an average target depth of 5.5 yards, so he's Michael Thomas, I think. Just kind of feels like...
Jeez.
I mean... Michael Thomas would probably have a 5.5 yard ADOT if he were playing a lot this year. Traquan Smith did lead in snap rate at 81%. Callaway played 73%. And only Alvin Kamara at 73% as well also played half the snaps among skill position guys. So if you're looking for DFS plays, the Saints aren't really my preferred team to go to at this point. I am willing to chase a high volume player in a good offense. Callaway is capable of producing based on his college numbers, but historically, no Saint gets peppered consistently in this offense outside of Michael Thomas. So I'm not really sold on Callaway. I don't quite want to chase it. It'll depend on what his salary is. What they do whenever Michael Thomas is out is just feature Alvin Kamara. He had 8 targets, 14 carries for 148 total yards, had 18.8 FanDuel points without a touchdown, 3 red zone carries. Receiving matters. It does. It just does, even on FanDuel. It does. He leads all backs in adjusted opportunities per game now at 30.2 on the season. Latavius Murray was a little bit of a nuisance with 11 carries and 4 red zone carries, but he played just 33% of snaps again. Kamara played 73%. They're at the Bears in week 8. That game's going to feel like an ugly one.
You're not excited about, game stacking a game with Nick Foles?
No.
Huh,
and
weird.
Now Kamara's playing the Bears.
You don't want David Montgomery's 10 carries for 27 yards?
Not particularly.
Interesting.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about the Panthers. They didn't run a ton of plays, so that ruined a lot here. Aside from DJ Moore, Moore had 93 yards and 2 touchdowns, but just 5 targets, and that includes a 74-yard score. So without that, just 19 yards on 4 targets. I know that's not fair, but he's been boosted by long touchdowns for 2 straight games on low volume. Just need to keep that in mind. Robbie Anderson once again led the team in targets. With 8, he had 74 yards. He had a team best 3 downfield targets. Moore had 2. Since Christian McCaffrey's injury, Anderson leads the team with 27% of the targets, which is 8.6 per game, 2.2 downfield per game. Moore's at 20%, 6.2 targets per game, 1.8 downfield. Anderson is still above DJ Moore. I feel very comfortable with that, and I hope that the recency bias turns more people to DJ Moore. They play Thursday night, so you can't really take advantage of that on a full slate necessarily. It's more of a single game slate, but Robbie Anderson's going to be a pretty intriguing play on Thursday. Mike Davis has a 21% target share in those games without McCaffrey. That's 6.6 per game, but he's had 2 down weeks in a row. In week 7, he did have half of the team's carries, but that was just 7 total for 12 yards. Helping him a bit were 5 targets for 24 yards. I mean, he's the guy in this backfield. It hasn't panned out for 2 games. McCaffrey's trending toward being back for Thursday. And honestly, I'm really thankful that we get a week of them off of the main slate so I don't have to guess because I'm a coward.
Well, I think the other thing, too, is that's helpful is that if Davis isn't good here, it means we could get the full McCaffrey when McCaffrey comes back, whereas initially there was talk about them splitting work. And, I don't care about Mike Davis. I just want bell cows. And if Mike Davis being bad for 2 weeks gets us bell cow McCaffrey back, I'm fine with that.
Yes, but I'd rather take those chances on a single game slate than not know what to do with Christian McCaffrey on a main slate, which is a terrifying thought. I
just hope that the way they use him on Thursday is representative of what they do going forward. I hope that. That's what I want. Let's move now to the Bills at the Jets, the most exciting game of the entire week. So glad that I was in the area to watch this game. The Bills offense scored no touchdowns. They were just fine overall. Josh Allen had 0.15 passing net expected points per dropback, which is basically exactly the league average. But you don't expect league average against the Jets. He still made some really bad Josh Allen-y mistakes, so he's come back to earth for sure. John Brown being banged up may have played a role here, so I'm not going to bump Allen down, but we've seen that the floor may not be as high as perceived, especially in tougher matchups, and he needs a back and forth, like every other quarterback, needs kind of a back and forth game to have a ceiling. With Brown being out, the targets were concentrated to Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley. Beasley had 12 targets. Stephon Diggs had 11, and Beasley actually had 73 air yards. He had 7 targets the week before that when Brown was playing through an injury. So I like Gabriel Davis. I think that he's a good player. But so I thought that he'd be the guy to benefit with Brown out, but I was wrong. Beasley is in play when Brown is out, unfortunately, as sad as that may be. Diggs still works. He just had a down day. He's the clear number 1 here regardless. The backfield was split, slightly favoring Devin Singletary. Singletary had 8 carries and 5 targets on a 56% snap rate, whereas Zach Moss was at 7 carries and 3 targets on a 46% snap rate. That did skew more towards Moss in the second half, so I would bet that Moss's role expands soon, but neither of those guys are in play for DFS until one of them pulls away. Even then, I wasn't using Devin Singletary that much when he was by himself. So, it is what it is. The Jets got Sam Darnold back and Denzel Mims, but the offense is still a horror show. Darnold finished with negative 0.41, passing net expected points per dropback. They might be viable when they have all of Crowder, Perriman, and Darnold healthy, but they're not going to push opposing teams very often. That does hurt everybody. With Crowder out, Denzel Mims actually had a pretty big role right away, which I was surprised about because he hasn't had a lot of practice time between training camp and now, but he had 7 targets. 2 of those were in the red zone, and that was while dealing with some Tre'Davious White. Brashad Perriman got hit really hard and left, and I would not be shocked if he misses time. Hopefully he's okay. Hopefully Crowder gets back soon, but if you think the Jets offense shows life, then guys like Mims can be semi-viable. Just don't expect big efficiency. But Michael Pirine finally had a big role, and he looked decent. He had 11 carries and 3 targets, but 20 of his 39 rushing yards came on one play. It's funny to see him get 20 when Le'Veon Bell never did, but then Le'Veon had bigger runs in Kansas City than he had in New York, whatever. 70% snap rate for Pirine. I like him more than I liked Gore, but that does not mean I'm going to use him. We need a ceiling in DFS, and no Jets players outside of Jamison Crowder, and maybe Denzel Mims have that. So the Jets are pretty dusty. Brandon, I think it's pretty much status quo in everyone here. Any takeaways for you or no?
I'll take some stabs at Denzel Mims. I really liked him coming out, but they are 20.5-point underdogs next week against the Chiefs. So
can we just cross that game off now? Is that okay? Oh my gosh, Le'Veon Bell revenge game. Oh my gosh, I forgot. Le'Veon's going to have 6 touchdowns. Just have Le'Veon play quarterback.
If they score 6 touchdowns, will they even hit their implied team total?
Yes, they would. I had to do some math because it was actually kind of close, but yes, they would. Yeah. Let's move to Green Bay at Houston. Devonta Adams was the play of the slate outside of Tyler Lockett. Jamal Williams, though, was really good. What'd you see here?
Yeah, I mean, Devonta's just crazy good. And, I mean, without Aaron Jones, it was like, Jamal Williams, but really the play was Devonta Adams. Adams had 16 targets. 4 of those were downfield. 3 were in the red zone. He had 13 catches, 196 yards, 2 touchdowns. You would think nobody on the slate would be able to top that, but that Sunday Night Hammer somehow led to Tyler Lockett beating that. But again, Adams had 16 targets. No other Packer had more than 5. That was Jamal Williams. Marquez Valdez-Scantling had a donut on 4 targets. And you would think a lot of those were downfield maybe, but just one of those was 16 yards downfield.
We need Alan Lazard back, man.
It's tough. In 3 games where Devontae's played, at least 55% of the snaps, he has a 38% target share, which is 14.3 per game, 3 downfield per game, 2 red zone targets per game. He's the best receiver in fantasy football. There's no real debate for me at this point. Marquez Valdez-Scantling's at 13% of the targets in those games. I just can't really, Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to throw the ball to anybody other than Devonta Adams, so it's a little hard to get there. Robert Tonyan has had splashes of relevance, but just 2 targets here. Jay Sternberger stole a touchdown, so I think Adams is really all we can just trust, as far as the pass catchers go. But Jamal Williams was the guy in the backfield with Aaron Jones out. He had 19 carries and 5 targets. Rookie A.J. Dillon had 5 carries and no targets. Williams had an 89% snap rate, according to NFL.com. Dillon just 23%. Williams played 9 of his 55 snaps as a wideout, according to Pro Football Focus. That's really promising usage. Aaron Jones was expected to be a game-time decision. The team apparently didn't want him to play if he wasn't 100%, so he clearly wasn't. He got rolled out, but I don't know what the situation will be moving forward. But if there's no Aaron Jones, we can feel really good about Jamal Williams with that snap rate. They host the Vikings next week. The total is 55.5. Should be a good one. The Texans, frustrating for me this week. Deshaun Watson climbed his way to 309 passing yards on 39 attempts, had 2 touchdowns, going to Will Fuller and David Johnson. But is Randall Cobb in that revenge game, leading the team with 10 targets? Brandon Cooks had 9. We both liked Cooks as a value play. Fuller had a tough individual matchup with Jair Alexander, was limited to 35 yards and his 6 targets, got bailed out with a score. I really don't think we should put too much emphasis on the target split based on this matchup. We were talking before the show about like we're always looking for takeaways. We're always trying to react to the most relevant information. I don't think this is one of those spots where I change anything. Since week 3, if we rule out Brandon Cooks leaving early in week 1, Will Fuller getting a donut himself in week 2. They each have a 22% target share. Cooks is barely ahead in targets per game, but Fuller's averaging 100 yards per game with a 13.5 yard average target depth. Cooks just 62 yards, an 8.4 yard ADOT, and Randall Cobb in that span actually has a 17% target share. He's not a by any means in spots where they can move the ball, but it's still Fuller over Cooks for me. Not really chasing anything else. Tight ends. David Johnson did his thing. I feel like every time I get the Texans, it's like 12 carries, 5 targets, something every like time. That. That's just what he does. He's maxed out at 18.4 FanDuel points on the season. He'll get you 10, probably won't get you 20. They're on bye in week 8.
Thankfully. No DJ. Although it will be weird not to have the Texans defense to kind of boost everything. I would say that, like, I don't know if this is like narrative-y, but Aaron Jones being kind of close to playing, like he flew with the team, and them facing the Vikings in week 8 makes me higher on it because it's like a division rivalry. I don't know if it's just the fans, but like they're not big fans of each other in general, those two teams. I think that might help Aaron Jones. So I'd be pretty interested in getting in on him there.
To play next week, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, also just like playing him a decent amount as long as he's healthy.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But I would be decently high on him. Let's move now to Dallas at Washington if we have to. Andy Dalton got absolutely smoked on a really rough hit and had to leave. It was pretty scary. And the offense wasn't doing anything with Andy Dalton. Ben DiNucci completed a couple of passes, but it's hard to see him being an upgrade over Dalton because I didn't know who he was before last week. I don't know how you can use anybody in this offense right now. They're just not going to move the ball, which makes even the highest usage guys tough to trust. It also does not help that Ezekiel Elliott lost work to Tony Pollard again. Zeke had 12 carries and 2 targets. Pollard had 8 carries and 1 target. Zeke's salary needs to come down like $2,500 or more before I sniff him, especially if Dalton misses time. Maybe it needs to be more than that. Like maybe he's 6,500 instead of the 7,000. I don't know. Like it's really bad. Maury Cooper is the only guy who looked usable here. He had 7 targets, 2 of which were deep, and he caught all 7. He's kind of usable, but his salary is going to put him out of play. So I don't plan on going at anyone on this team, no matter how low the salaries get, unless Dalton is good to go or they're an elite matchup, because there's just, I don't know. It's bad. Antonio Gibson, not bad. Had a huge day for Washington. He had 20 carries and 1 target, but those 20 carries went for 128 yards and a touchdown. He had the only running back carry inside the 10-yard line. He played 49% of the snaps. That's his 3rd highest mark of the season. The early down work was great to see. He hadn't gotten more than 13 carries in a game yet this year. If I were projecting adjusted opportunities for Gibson, I'd be, say, between around 24 or so per game. I'm more willing to consider him now than I was before, but there's still something left to be desired with the profile. Like Peyton Barber is getting snaps late, and like I don't want there to be such a narrow set of game flows in which the player works. Like Gibson, they were ahead because he played well, but like if Barber is going to get work late, that kind of is annoying. Terry McLaurin does not leave much to be desired. He had 11 targets. He turned into 90 yards and a touchdown. McLaurin seemingly would be more efficient with Kyle Allen, but his expected points per target is actually lower with him than it was with Dwayne Haskins. So the efficiency hasn't changed much. He's just getting a lot of volume. Logan Thomas is getting more efficient. He had 60 yards and a touchdown, but he also had just 4 targets for the 4th straight game. So I think it's still just McLaurin as a core option for me here. Gibson is a consideration. I would really like to not use Thomas even once you adjust the expectations for his position. So McLaurin's floor is super high. We just needed to be competitive games to see his ceiling. McLaurin, yes. I like that. Any other takeaways for you, Brandon? I think that bumping up Gibson, but still not someone I actively want to use. Are you in the same boat there?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, if we're talking season long, it's like, yeah, this is great news. For DFS, it's not enough. It's just, there's not enough work. You said that they got ahead because of him, and then he didn't play a whole lot, which is like a Dalvin Cook thing, but in a much worse situation.
True. Yeah.
So I'm not saying that's what it is, but that just reminds me of it. And you don't want that.
Yeah.
So I don't really know. I think it's just McLaurin here.
Yeah. I'm just glad McLaurin didn't burn me because I had 0 shares because I hated that game so much. He had a touchdown early, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get torched.
We had him in the snake draft. I thought you'd be higher on him.
Did I have him in the snake draft?
You did.
Wow. I did not look at the snake draft.
And I was surprised.
Did I win? I don't think I did.
Snake draft?
No. Did I?
No.
Oh, I
had Tyler Lockett and Devonta Adams.
All right, let's move to Tampa Bay, Las Vegas, and forget that happened. I forgot this game happened because it wasn't on the main slate, so I just kind of ignored it the entire day. So, Brandon, I'm just going to lean on you. Tell me what happened in this game so I know what to think of it.
Yeah, it's a weird. Like we don't get games that we're not really sweating. That are played. I mean, there were 65 total points, but 45 of them came from the Buccaneers. Tom Brady had a really good game, 369 yards and 4 touchdowns. You might think that Mike Evans would have been a big part of that, but he was not. He had 2 targets for 37 yards. I didn't see all of this game, but I did see at least one pass interference call that he drew on a downfield target. You can throw that in there if you want, but it's still not going to look great for Mike Evans, no matter how you spin it. The targets instead went to Scotty Miller and Chris Godwin with 9. Rob Gronkowski had 8. Leonard Fournette had 7. Gronkowski had 4 downfield targets. Miller had 3. Godwin and Evans were credited with 1 each. If you look at the target shares in games with Chris Godwin, it's been a little bit even. That's bad for DFS. Godwin's at 20% himself. Gronkowski's at 18%. Miller's at 15%. And Evans is at 8%.
When I think of Scotty Miller, I think 2x Mike Evans.
Godwin has been really efficient on his targets. He's involved in the red zone. He's a clear, probably like 2 tiers above Evans, at least at this point. Evans just isn't getting downfield work. He's averaging 1 per game with Godwin. The ADOT for him is 9 yards. I'd be fine with low volume if he was just getting like insane amounts of deep work on them, but it's just not really there. I'm also not there with Scotty Miller just because the target shares it kind of caps him. I mean, I know he's a good game here, but I'm actually more inclined in Rob Gronkowski. He's been trending up. His role's improved kind of throughout the year, depending on like where you make that demarcation. But in 3 games since week 3 with Chris Godwin, he leads the team with a 21% target share, which is good for a tight end. 2.7 downfield targets per game in that sample, 2 red zone targets per game. I'm very optimistic. Anytime you get a tight end who can do something, that's amazing. I'm not saying Gronkowski's back to what he was, but downfield work, red zone work, solid volume work overall. I don't know what else you could ask for from a tight end. The backfield is again messy. Leonard Fournette played, relevant snaps. He played 56%. Ronald Jones was at 43%. Fournette had 11 carries and 7 targets. Ronald Jones had 13 carries and 2 targets. Yes, there was a blowout, but in the first half, Fournette had 5 carries and 6 targets. Jones had 7 carries and 1 target. If you look at games with Fournette playing, Fournette has an edge in adjusted opportunities per game with 19.3. Jones is at 16.3. That's not enough to go here in DFS. They're at the Giants on Monday night. It should be a one-sided game. Not really looking forward to that one, as we mentioned already. And for the Raiders, it was a really underwhelming showing coming out of a bye with just 20 points. It's a really tough defense, I know that, but you expect a little bit more coming out of a bye. 6 different Raiders were credited with carries. Josh Jacobs had 17 yards on 10 carries, 4 targets, played 49% of the snaps, had been averaging around 67% entering the week, ran 16 of 39 routes, which is about what he typically runs. I think the takeaway here for Jacobs is that he still has one of the better roles in the game, but he's not a can't-miss play. I was more inclined to use him in negative game script. I don't really think I'm there at this point. He's more of a game script dependent back with a high floor, potentially a high ceiling. Nelson Aglor, though, has been sneaky good lately. He and Darren Waller led the team with 9 targets. Aglor had 107 yards and a touchdown. Waller scored as well. He had 50 yards. The downfield work favored Aglor, who had 3 of 7 downfield looks. In week 7, Aglor led the receivers with a 78% snap rate. If you look at the targets since week 5, when Aguilar's snap rate went up and Henry Ruggs played, which is just 2 games, but still probably the most relevant sample, Darren Waller leads the team with 24% of the targets. Aguilar is at 16%. Jacobs and Hunter Renfrow are at 10%. It's kind of gross. I like Waller for a tight end. If I'm into the offense, I'll go to Aguilar. Jacobs, like I said, kind of game script dependent. They're at the Browns in week 8 with a high total of 55.5.
So with this information in mind with Josh Jacobs, I agree that like it does worry me more now that he may be kind of dependent on the way the game breaks. Name that salary for Josh Jacobs in a game that I think we're going to like, Vegas against Cleveland.
So he wasn't on the main slate, so I don't actually know what his salary would have been.
That's good. You got to make it up, baby.
Yeah, it's this might be a little low, but given everything, I'd put him in like the 75 range.
I was thinking 76. I 100% agree. I think that if there's a possibility my guy's not going to be on the field, that's tough. But like he's not Derrick Henry, but he has like a similar thing where it's like there's a pretty wide range of outcomes, which is not bad if he can hit the ceiling. And I think that Jacobs can. His salary against the Cleveland Browns next week, stalling. He is 78. So right in line with where we thought. Kareem Hunt is 82. At those respective salaries, it's Hunt over Jacobs, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
But I think they're both pretty good options. I was tweeting about this on yesterday. That was yesterday. You can stack running backs in the same game. They can both pay off. Like Kareem Hunt and Gio Bernard both paid off on Sunday. That's fine. So I will have lineups where I stack both within game stacks. So I think they both work a lot. And I think that's an appropriate salary for Josh Jacobs. Does not make him like a priority, but like he's in play for sure. The 2020 NFL season trucking along, and there is no easier way to get in on the action than with FanDuel's Gridiron Pick'em contest. All you have to do is pick the winner of each week's matchups correctly. You'll take home a share of the $5,000 weekly jackpot. The best part, it is completely free to play. We are already heading into week number 8 next of the NFL season. So what are you waiting for? To enter for free, visit playfree.fanduel.com/gridiron. That's playfree.fanduel.com/gridiron. Eligibility restrictions apply. Let's talk Jacksonville Chargers and Justin Herbert, man. He's pretty freaking good, and he's really fun. He went for 347 yards and 3 touchdowns. They let him throw 43 times as well, which is encouraging for a team that can occasionally be a bit too rush heavy. He's at 0.29 passing net expected points per dropback for the full season, despite facing, as Brandon mentioned on the preview podcast, a lot of tough defenses before this week. So we should push up this entire offense with Herbert playing as well as they are, and they're showing faith in him, which is justified. So I'm going to talk to you more about this offense in a second, but I think they're fun. Herbert went right back to feeding Keenan Allen. He had 13 targets to lead the team. They've had 2 full games with both Keenan and Mike Williams healthy and Herbert starting, and Keenan has 32% of the targets in that time. Hunter Henry is second on the team with 21%. Williams has 10%. I can see Williams being in play if it's a game that you are stacking, but I don't think he has standalone value right now. Keenan does, shockingly. I think that like Keenan should have a salary in like the mid 8,000 range because he's just awesome. So Keenan Allen, there's not a whole lot left to say. They get Denver next week in what profiles is a pretty gross game, but it's not bad. The running backs benefit from Herbert being good too, but things are super spread out there. Joshua Kelly had 12 carries and 5 targets on a 47% snap rate. Justin Jackson had 5 carries and 6 targets on a 38% snap rate. Kelly will get the goal line stuff, so if I could bank on the target sticking, he'd be interesting, but I can't. So I'm going to avoid until someone pulls away. Jackson was banged up coming into this game, so I think it's split. I'm okay avoiding. There were rumors that Gardner Minshew could get benched on Sunday. He didn't do a ton, but he wasn't abhorrent. He was at 0.08 passing net expected points per dropback against a decent defense. So below average, but you kind of expect that against a good defense. I would not factor in him getting benched in your decision-making, but he's definitely not elevating the offense. And speaking of which, let's talk about DJ Chark. Chark, 7 targets. That led the team, but he turned it into 26 yards. He has 21 targets the past 2 games, but it's 71 yards. Again, he's Frank Gore at this point. Nobody had more than 44 yards in the day. Chark and Robinson were the only guys with more than 3 targets. So you can talk yourself into Chark, but you have to be mentally prepared for it to be hideously inefficient. And again, I don't think this is a DJ Chark problem. To make that clear, I don't think it's him. All the other pass catches are off the table. I'm sorry, Brandon. Yes, if they're Chris Conley, birthday touchdown, he is too. James Robinson, though, is the one really usable guy here. Chris Thompson tested positive for COVID, so Robinson was just a full-blown bell cow. He had an 89% snap rate. No other running back touched the ball. He had 22 carries and 6 targets, which is 34 adjusted opportunities, and he's up to 24 adjusted opportunities per game, which is a really solid number. But with Thompson likely to miss more time, we should view Robinson as a bell cow. It's just a bad offense. So that's how to view Robinson. Bell cow and a bad offense. There's value in those touches. Just keep in mind the offense is bad until they turn to Mike Glennon. We'll leave that at that. But Brandon, Justin Herbert. So I ate crow on Daniel Jones last year because I was low on him coming out, and I feel like that was premature. I don't think I needed to eat crow there. However,
no, he had like that one game, and everyone put him in the Hall of Fame.
No, he had 3 good games, and everyone put him in the Hall of Fame.
Well, it was after the first good game that he was in the Hall of Fame.
Yes, exactly.
The next 2 just added to his legacy.
So with Justin Herbert, I was more wishy-washy on him coming out. I think that what he's doing is more legit, though, because he was in this bucket of first-round quarterbacks who were young, experienced, but just middling efficiency. And that's actually a really good bucket. It includes Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, 3 MVP winners, Jared Goff, a future MVP winner, obviously, and Matthew Stafford. It does include Blake Bortles and Paxton Lynch, too. But, I am very willing to accept the fact that Justin Herbert is a good football player. And I think we need to view this Chargers offense as being, decent. Not, I don't know if they're top 10, but they're at least in that discussion, whereas I would not have put them anywhere close to that before. How are you viewing this offense as a whole based on what you've seen out of Justin Herbert?
Yeah, I mentioned on Thursday that Herbert played nothing but top 12 opponents in terms of adjusted pass defense based on numberFire's metrics. And despite that, he had been at 0.24 passing net expected points per dropback. League average is 0.15, 0.14 depends. But he was very good despite those. Yeah. And so the reason I liked him and I named him as a player pick, this isn't like a braggy thing. He was efficient in tough spots. There's no reason to expect he would be inefficient against the Jaguars. So if we can kind of trust him, because Joe Burrow, I know sounds like a little bit of a tangent. Joe Burrow's been really matchup dependent so far. He's been amazing against poor opponents, but struggled against good opponents. We haven't seen that from Herbert. I know it's a small sample right now, but if you can trust this offense in any particular matchup, that bumps up everyone. And honestly, Keenan Allen at this point has been
name that salary for Keenan against Denver.
Well, it feels like a little bit of a cheat code because he never gets the respect in terms of salary.
Yeah.
I would put him around 77, but I would imagine he's going to be. Are you going to say 8,500?
I did say 85. You didn't. I said 85. I said he's a mid 8,000 wide receiver in that
matchup.
Well, okay, so the reason that I wasn't on Herbert this week was because I didn't think the Jags offense would do anything. They did because James Robinson is really good at football.
So here's the thing, we play this game differently and it causes a lot of problems. Calvin Ridley was 84 this week.
Is there a huge difference between them, honestly?
Keenan Allen in this game coming up.
I think Denver will score. I know this is. Please pretend that what happened on Sunday didn't happen. I had the over on 17 points. They missed an extra point early, and I was like, I hope that doesn't hurt me. And it did. I think Denver, I have more faith in the Denver offense in Denver than I did in the Jacksonville offense in Los Angeles. So I am going to be higher on Keenan Allen. Name that salary for Keenan.
I said 77. I would go up to 8,000. He's not going to be there.
He's 74. He's a cash game player.
Yeah. Like, I love Keenan. Like, I'm coming from a place where I love Keenan Allen, but 85 in this matchup is just, that's too high.
I don't agree. I don't agree.
I would put him as the wide receiver.
He's getting Devonta Adams usage, and Devonta's worth like 93. So why can't Keenan be worth 85 in a worse game?
I mean, he can be, but he's not.
Okay. Well, we're going to use him in cash. Don't let me talk myself out of Keenan Allen, please.
Okay.
I'm begging you that.
Okay.
Begging. Let's move on to Kansas City at Denver. I'll let you take this one. Yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah, one-sided game. Mm-hmm. Starters were pulled.
Yep.
So
how did Travis Kelce do?
Not great.
That's all I've got.
I have in my notes, I got to take the L on Travis Kelce.
You take that, I'll take the L on the Denver offense.
Kelce, 3 targets, caught all of them for 31 yards, but the Broncos just didn't do anything. And Tyreek Hill was the one Chief who got the passing volume that was there. The Chiefs ran 51 plays. The Broncos had 76. So, again, not a whole lot of plays for the Chiefs. Tyreek Hill had 10 targets, 55 yards, and a touchdown. Patrick Mahomes had just 200 total passing yards on 23 attempts. Not great. Again, Denver, despite Drew Lock's 3 amazing, glorious passes against the Patriots last week, did not keep pace with the Chiefs this week. Nobody really benefited without Sammy Watkins here, given the low volume. I think routes are probably the most important stat for this team at this point. They can fluctuate, but Tyreek Hill was credited with 24, according to Pro Football Focus, same as Travis Kelce. Demarcus Robinson ran 21. Mecole Hardman ran 11. Clyde Edwards-Helaire 12. And Le'Veon Bell 11. Robinson right now is still above Mecole Hardman, no matter what anybody on Twitter wants to think. It's just the case. If Tyreek Hill is hurt, Mecole Hardman gets a boost. If Sammy Watkins is hurt, it's Demarcus Robinson. I think we know that. I'm not changing my opinion on this offense at all. The first look at Le'Veon Bell and Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the backfield favored Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The first half, 5 carries and 1 target for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 3 carries, no targets for Bell. Overall, 8 carries and 4 targets for Edwards-Helaire, 6 carries and no targets for Bell. The snaps ended up being 53% for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 33% for Le'Veon Bell. Each had a carry inside the 10. So, I mean, Edwards-Helaire is ahead right now, but did drop a touchdown. And I think this is going to be a really tough situation for DFS. You mentioned the Le'Veon Bell revenge game. You'd have to just assume that Le'Veon Bell gets more and more involved. So they honestly probably could both go off next week against the Jets, but it's going to be hard to trust the offense if the other team can't keep pace, which is kind of what happened to the Chiefs this week because the Broncos just struggled offensively. Drew Lock was 24 of 40, 254 yards, no touchdowns, 2 picks, lost 17.09 passing net expected points. That's real bad. The shining beacon of hope is that Noah Fant returned. He had 7 targets, but so did fellow tight end Albert Okwuegbunam. Okwuegbunam caught all 7 of his targets.
I'm proud of you. You got it.
I told you I did a lot of research on
I know.
A lot of research. Okwuegbunam. It's also it looks harder than it is. Okwuegbunam is actually pretty easy and fun to say. But he caught all 7 of his targets for 60 yards, led the team. Albert O is like a really intriguing prospect, so hopefully he could stay involved. I think this does actually suggest that Okwuegbunam is possibly here to stay in a second game. Played 38% of the snaps last week without Fant, 40% this week with him. 7 targets on 31 snaps. Pretty nice to see for Okwuegbunam. The target shares behind them were really spread out. 6 other players had between 3 and 4 targets. So if Drew Lock's not going to be more efficient, you can't really chase that. I'm very low on this offense at this point. I'm sure Jim has some counterpoints that are probably viable, but it's really hard to buy into an offense when the quarterback play has just been bad. Tim Patrick hurt his hamstring here. So
now I have to jump ship. Tim Patrick was the cog. That's my out. That's my out.
It's possible.
Yeah.
I think this is probably the best sample, honestly, because we had KJ Hamler, Noah Fant back, Okoye Bonham playing somewhat relevant snaps. So with that, I don't like anybody. Philip Lindsay left with a concussion in this game, so Melvin Gordon had a big game, 17 carries and 4 targets. The big game for Melvin Gordon, I should say. 60% of the snaps. Royce Freeman was at 23%. I'm not really there with Gordon, even if he's in the 70% snap range. With the Chargers in Week 8, it's a 44.5-point total. It's very low relative to other games, so that's kind of why I'm a little bit lower on Keenan Allen than putting him as the wide receiver 2.
That's what I'm saying. You lower from 93 to 85. Easy. Yeah. Easy game. I think that I agree with you very much on what you said about Mecole, where like he's dependent on only one player, and that's Tyreek Hill. So I had some Mecole here because like it seems like his role is just kind of going to fluctuate, however things go. And like he had more usage this week than he did last week, but he has a path to a decent game, whereas most of the guys in this, Demarcus Robinson does not. So I'm fine taking stats of Mecole.
Robinson gets too much hate, honestly.
Does he?
I mean,
he's aggressively boring. Aggressively.
So you just hate him.
I don't hate him. I hate his usage.
Look, if the offense has to throw because the other team does anything, Robinson's on the field, and you can do a whole lot worse than being on the field running routes with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, such as playing a Bronco.
Yeah, but like if you're running routes that are just curls and like you're like not getting downfield.
He gets end zone targets. He gets sneaky end zone targets.
He has 3 deep targets all year, right? Something like that.
He had like 2 or 3, I think, called back either.
Sure he did. I believe you. Let's move down to San Francisco at New England. The headliner of this game was going to be Jeff Wilson.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, he got his ankle rolled up on while scoring his 3rd touchdown of the game. Like, he was awesome. So it stinks. It didn't look good. He's going to miss time. Raheem Mostert is on IR. Tevin Coleman apparently has an outside shot to play in Week 8, but if he doesn't, JaMychal Hasty seems to hold a pretty big edge here. He got 9 carries and 1 target. Jerick McKinnon had 3 carries and none. JaMychal Hasty also outcarried McKinnon last week, so he's the lead back. What are you laughing at?
I just saw how short your notes section is on this game.
Well, yeah. What are you going to say about the Patriots?
I know, it's so bad.
It's so bad. It's terrible. Anyway, so Tevin could get really solid if he's solid work if he's able to go because no one else is healthy, but like, I don't know, man. I feel bad for Jeff Wilson. He was awesome. Yeah. It stinks. But they also gave like a goal line carry to Kyle Juszczyk, and Deebo Samuel was lined up as a running back a lot, but then Deebo hurt his hamstring. I don't know what hex has been put on the 49ers, but take it off. Like stop taking away the fun players like Deebo. He's fun, but it led to a lot of work for Brandon Ayuk. Ayuk had 7 targets, which is tied to George Kittle for the team lead. In the 4 games with Kittle, Ayuk is at 17% of the targets, though Deebo did play in 2 of those. Kittle's at 31%. Ayuk is averaging 1 deep target per game in that span. Kittle's at 0.75. Kittle is obviously the main guy here, but I'd be willing to target Ayuk if Samuel misses time, especially with the rushing work that he gets. Like, that is very valuable for wide receivers, not just because he can get you points, but because it shows the team wants the ball in their hands, which is valuable info to have. So Ayuk is in play if Deebo misses time. It's just, I wish they'd stop getting hurt because it stinks. Cam played terribly and got benched, but the game was out of hand. Bill Belichick has already said Cam will start next week, as he should, because Stidham ain't better. Cam is at negative 0.07 passing net expected points per dropback for the full season. He's kind of been like Daniel Jones, except less volume. They got David Andrews back this week, but then they lost 2 more offensive linemen during the game, including Joe Thuney, who's good. The line stinks. The receivers stink. It makes Cam pretty irrelevant for DFS, even with all the running. Julian Edelman had 179 yards in week 2. He has had 79 in 4 games since. I'm not using him. N'Keal Harry got a concussion and left. Don't use the pass catchers here or the running backs. Damian Harris, 10 carries, no targets. This whole team is a cross-off for DFS. It is a blessing when the Patriots are on the main slate because it's one less team you have to research. They suck. Brandon, any takeaways from the 49ers? The Patriots do not exist.
I mean, it's just really sad for Jeff Wilson.
Yeah.
But even with that, I don't know what's going to happen at running back. This is just one of those teams where an injury doesn't really solve anything.
Yeah.
Because they just have another guy that they're going to put in there. I mean, I would play Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle if the spot's right. I like Ayuk a lot. They can get him creative touches, but I mean, it's kind of just
they get Seattle next week, and like that spot is right.
Yeah. That's
like Kittle's going to get at least 13 targets in that game, right? Minimum.
Yeah.
Like 25 dropbacks, 13 targets.
Yeah, he's 77.
That's fine. I'll pay that.
No.
I am more willing to use Kittle at that salary than I am Kelsey at his salary last week.
Yeah, me too. And I was willing to use Travis Kelce.
Okay.
Although I will say, once the forecast hit and value opened up, it changed a little bit. But
for sure. Yep, absolutely. Let's move now to the fun game, Seattle and Arizona. Brandon, this one is the one that carried you to a really nice week. We're going to talk about Metcalf and Lockett because someone in chat is very upset that I said to use DK Metcalf. So we'll talk about this. Tell me the recap, and then we'll talk about those two guys.
Okay. The recap, a bit of everything here. There were big plays. It was back and forth. There were no injuries, unfortunately, including to running backs. Chris Carson, he had a foot sprain that requires an MRI. No update for me just yet at this point. Kenyon Drake was carted off with an ankle injury as well. But as for the better news, Kyler Murray compiled 360 passing yards on 48 attempts, 3 touchdowns, once again ran for a touchdown to go along with 67 yards and 14 rushes. He has a rushing touchdown in 5 of 7 games, at least 29 rushing yards and 5 carries in all of them. It's really higher than that. He's kind of had like one outlier game where it's been like those numbers. He's averaging north of 12 rushing points alone. If you can get that at quarterback, you kind of just take it. It's been pretty incredible. The passing efficiency, still about league average, but it is trending up. Just 3 downfield targets, despite the 48 overall. But, I mean, he fed DeAndre Hopkins 12 of those targets. He had 103 yards and a touchdown. Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk each had 8 targets. Chase Edmonds had 7 targets. In 6 games with Christian Kirk, DeAndre Hopkins leads the team with 28% of the targets, which is 10.3 per game. Just like a league average, ADOT, 7.8 yards. Larry Fitzgerald's at 16% of the targets, but a 5.3 yard average target depth. Christian Kirk, a little bit lower at 15%, but a 13.8 yard ADOT, which is pretty substantial. With a lack of kind of downfield work overall, I still want to put Christian Kirk higher than most players in his salary range because he's in a good offense and he does get what downfield work there is. And Hopkins obviously is a stud. Kenyan Drake had 14 carries and 2 targets on his 34 snaps, which was 40% before leaving. Chase Edmonds had those aforementioned 7 targets, also 5 carries for 58 yards, played 61% of the snaps. Edmonds would be a really fun DFS play if things are cleared in front of him. He has a rushing success rate of 59% according to numberFire. Drake is at a more league average. Actually, league average I think is like 48%. Drake's at 39% because Drake's been pretty rough. But he's a pass-catching back, so I'm really interested to see what his salary will wind up being. But the Cardinals are on bye in Week 8. Sticking with running backs, Chris Carson, again, got injured, played 15 snaps, which was 18%. That paved the way for Carlos Hyde to play 49% of the snaps. Travis Homer was at 19%, DJ Dallas at 14%, but Hyde was the guy. He handled 15 of 30 overall carries, 4 of 48 targets. It's pretty evident that he would be the guy to replace Carson if Carson misses extended time. But let's talk about the big guy, big dog.
Biggest man in this game.
Tyler Lockett, 20 targets, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. And that alone is nuts, but no other Seahawk had more than 5 targets, which is like that's like video game numbers, like whenever you're trying to get your guy to win the Heisman and like NCAA back in the day. DK Metcalf.
Wait, you played wide receiver in the college football video games?
Well, like you would create a character and like try to win.
Yeah, but you have to be quarterback or running back. Why would you pick a wide receiver?
You can be a receiver?
You could be a receiver. Why would you?
Because it's fun sometimes.
No.
I mean, when you're like 16 and you're playing your
you want to be quarterback.
Through,
I was an option quarterback at USC, so I could play with Reggie Bush.
Yeah, you do that sometimes, but then other times, like on your 8th or 9th time through, you don't need to play the same. Get out of here! Get out of here! DK Metcalf had 5 targets. 3 of them were downfield. Almost scored late, but it got called back on holding. This has actually shifted the season-long data. Entering the week, Metcalf had a 23% target share, 23.1, I should say. Lockett was at 22.5, so they both actually rounded 23%. But now, Lockett's at 26.5%, Metcalf's at 20.1%. But DK Metcalf still leads in downfield targets per game, 3.2. Lockett's at 1.7. Metcalf has a 16.6 yard average target depth, which is nuts. Lockett's is now 10 yards. My real assumption is that this is still a 1A, 1B situation. I kind of still have Metcalf as the 1A due to the downfield work. I feel like you have takes now based on what you said about the chat.
Yeah, so the person in chat is mad that I recommended DK Metcalf, but like, if it helps, I also use DK Metcalf, and it cost me literally thousands of dollars to have him in there instead of Tyler Lockett. So just know I am also upset about it. But like, I think that I'm okay with it because like I know why he's DK Metcalf. That's because he was getting 46% of the downfield work, whereas Lockett was at like 23% or something like that going into this game. Like, that's fine. I think that the big change that I would have is that it makes me more willing to consider matchups when it comes to these two guys, because it was clear going into the week that Lockett had the preferred matchup over Metcalf, and that's how things played out. So I think that's the one change where, like, if they are both in similar matchups, I'm going to go Metcalf every time. But if Lockett has the better matchup, I'll go Lockett.
Yeah, I mean, despite 20 targets to 5 targets, they each had 3 downfield targets.
Yeah.
Like, yes, Tyler Lockett wound up being the better play. Was DK Metcalf a bad process play? No. And if you are angry about the results, get used to it, because some great plays don't always work.
There have been a lot worse recommendations than that.
I recommended like Travis Kelce.
Yeah. So A, we've made worse recommendations, believe me. B, it hurt me too. So at least you got that. That was always what I had to say in the baseball ones whenever I made a bad pick. Like, at least I'm recommending and I'm using it too, and it's gonna hurt me as well. So
I mean, the game went into overtime. There's so many points. If you told me just the result, like the score, and like if you gave me Russell Wilson's stat line, I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to use a ton of DK Metcalf.
Yeah. So I think we're good here.
Who's the head? Is it still Metcalf for you over Lockett?
Yeah,
or is it
I think you said it right.
Okay. I mean,
1A, 1B with Metcalf ahead, and then consider matchups a little bit.
Yeah.
Easy game.
And if everyone plays Lockett next week, I don't actually know who they play next week.
San Francisco.
Yeah. I mean, if everyone's
their corner's been playing better recently.
They've been pretty solid. Yeah.
But like, I think that like we have to analyze which one we want to attack, actually, because like Russ can definitely beat a good defense. I don't care. I
mean, let's look at salaries quickly, because this is relevant, and this will probably shift my whole. Oh wow. Metcalf 78, Lockett 72. So everyone's just going to play Tyler Lockett. Lockett's going to be significantly more popular. I would have to assume.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think it's going to be like, this is a very different situation, but it's going to be like the Crabtree Cooper year. Although I guess that was where Cooper was always more popular. There were like a couple of games where Crabtree was, I guess, but
yeah,
I think that like Metcalf will bounce back and he'll be fine. So, I'm willing to go back there again. I do want to like delve into like the matchups and stuff like that, because I think that does matter a lot with this team, whereas I don't care as much. I didn't care enough apparently going into this game, but we'll see.
I mean, yeah, he had he ran, who was it? Buda Baker. He ran down. He had that screen pass that should have been a touchdown if not for the holding. I mean, he probably would have got past and scored anyway, but like,
yeah,
I don't care. I think DK Metcalf was a fantastic process play, and there's really no way around that.
But Tyler Lockett got you that money, So kudos to Tyler Lockett. We can all appreciate Tyler Lockett. And we'll go back to DK Metcalf eventually, and it'll all be good. That is all the time that we have for today. Brandon, I guess actually should mention that we want Kenyon Drake to be healthy. However, if he's not, Chase Edmonds would be amazing. And you said that. I just wanted to ditto that. He'd be amazing.
Yeah.
So hopefully Kenyan Drake is okay to play after the bye. But if he's not, Chase Edmonds no matter what. That is all the time that we have for today. I'd mentioned before the Listener League will be posted later. It's actually already posted. So you go to FanDuel.com/league/Listener League to get yourself entered for the Week 8 Listener League. Again, $5 entry, 3 entries max. And there is no rake, so make sure you go to FanDuel.com/league/Listener League to reserve your spot for the Week 8 contest. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
Matt Gadula13, GDULA13.
And I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. We'll be back again on Thursday to get you set for week number 8. Until then, though, good luck with your Monday night contests and all other DFS play. We'll talk to you again soon. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire.